My dear friends, surely this weekend on which America was born is not just a holiday weekend. It's more than hot dogs, baseball, and fireworks for all people who make America their home. I often think about Winston Churchill's statement about capitalism when I think about our country. America is the worst system of all, except for the rest. We have no excuse for the poverty, lack of access to health care, and other inequities in American society. But the principles, ideals, and freedoms which serve as the bedrock of our nation's foundation make this country the world's last best hope for freedom and the spirit of religious pluralism. The Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, the Constitution are sacred documents. They really are. Each of them is a religious statement that has its roots in Torah values. The Declaration of Independence begins with the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." What does that mean, though? We have all said these words so often that we know them by heart, but what do they mean? Is it really self-evident that all men are created equal? Some men are tall, some are short, some are wise, some are foolish, some are white, some are black or brown. In what sense is it self-evident that they are created equal? There's nothing self-evident about it at all. It's only self-evident that all people are created equal, not just men, but all persons. It's only self-evident if you look at people through the Torah's eyes. If you take seriously what it says in Genesis, how God created the human being in God's image. Clearly, we were all created equal in God's eyes, but we don't stay equal when humans get involved. Not only this Shabbat, but this entire 4th of July weekend ought to be a time for remembering and celebrating the values on which America was established. As the great American Jewish cowboy, singer, and candidate for Texas governor, Kinky Friedman, puts it, if you're looking for God's helping hand, try the one at the end of your arm. We are God's helping hands in this world. But this doesn't mean that religion and the Bible or even the Constitution are used for holy purposes. Often they're used to justify even gun violence. Even the Bible itself can be used as a weapon. In the same way, a knife can be used either by an attacker to injure someone, or a knife can be used by a surgeon to heal someone. No denomination or religion has a monopoly on faith. The Torah is God's greatest gift of love to us, but since we are mortal, imperfect, fallible rays of God's sunlight, we discover in our study of sacred texts that the Bible is also the product of individuals who lived in particular eras of time, and what they wrote down also reflects the context in which they live. Whether those individuals were the flawed founding fathers of Judaism or the flawed founding fathers of the United States of America. This week's Torah portion opens on such a disturbing note. Pinchas, the name of the portion, Pinchas the high priest, the big kahuna, goes ballistic over the sexual relations of an Israelite man with a Midianite woman. he kills them both with a spear in the midst of their activity. The Israelites then retaliate against the Midianites for allowing their women to seduce the Israelite men. Pinchas is a zealot. And while he is rewarded by God, believe it or not, with the Brit Shalom, the covenant of peace, in every Torah scroll, the word shalom in that phrase referring to Pinchas is distorted. You all know shalom in Hebrew, shin lamed vav, final mem. The letter vav in that word shalom, only in that context in the Torah, is bent out of shape. Every Torah scribe known as a sofer, including ours here at Temple, has to write it that way. Every Torah reflects this strange vav. Why this unusually drawn letter? No one really knows, but one view is that the vav is distorted because the shalom was not really a full shalom for this zealot. Enthusiasm is a sacred mission, even passion for a cause. It's great, admirable, often necessary. But when zeal is combined with fear or anger, it leads to fanaticism and violence, never a full shalom. So the spelling of shalom regarding Pinchas is distorted. In that light, I call your attention to a story in one of the prophetic readings of our faith, which takes place in the 11th chapter of the book of Judges, and it's a story related to this idea, the importance of tempering our passion and zeal with our humanity. It's a story that has puzzled people throughout the centuries. It's the story of Jephthah. Like Pinchas, a leader, he was the ancient warrior of the Jewish people, a man who possessed such capacity and passion and enthusiasm for leadership. The Bible relates that Jephthah, in the stress of battle for his nation and motivated by a surge of religious feeling, makes this promise to God. If I'm victorious, then the first thing that comes out of my house, meaning livestock or other creature, will be offered unto God as an offering. Jephthah wins the battle. He goes home. And guess what? His daughter emerges from the house first to congratulate her father before any animals. And Jephthah is stricken with grief, but having made his promise, he fulfills his vow. Now, there have been debates, just like we don't know why that vav is broken. There have been debates about what was meant by the Hebrew word offered unto God. Many of our sainted scholars argued that Jephthah brought his daughter up into the mountains where she spent the rest of her days in a Jewish monastery, you might say, in prayer and solitude. They were trying to figure out this craziness. Others believe that Jephthah actually offered her as a sacrifice. And unlike the story of Abraham and Isaac, you remember where God stays the hand of Abraham and tells him, don't touch the boy. Here we have a case where zeal, Pinchas, passion for one's nation. Here we have a case where the father follows through, or ostensibly, the rabbis say. Throughout Jewish history, his conduct was pointed out as an example of the wrong kind of religion. The early rabbis also point out many things wrong with the story. I'm just going to point out a few things wrong so that you can go to sleep tonight. First, Jephthah promises something which wasn't clear in his own mind. He promised to offer what came out of his house. So the rabbis ask, how did he know what would come out? Suppose it was a blemished animal that came out. Would he have brought that offering to God? Of course not. turned out to be his daughter, who was the most precious thing in the world to him. How can a person promise that which is unknown to him or her? And one of the Jewish lessons of the story, therefore, is never to make advanced commitments when the consequences that will follow are just unknown. And the rabbis also criticized his apparent attitude toward the irrevocable idea or promise of a man's word. In other words, you must keep promises. But if you make a promise that leads to evil consequences, there is a moral remedy. If a politician in the nation, or if a warrior in the Jewish nation in the Bible makes a promise that leads to an evil consequence, the remedy is specified in the Torah. You can annul the vow. In Jewish tradition, you can go to a rabbi and explain the fact that a promise was made that was going to produce really awful, evil, wrong results. Scholar or the rabbi may annul such a vow. We're not blindly and fatalistically bound to any promises that are ill-advised. Thirdly, Jephthah should have known that God never requires human offerings. The climax of the Abraham and Isaac story, as I said before and will repeat, Al tishlach yadka, do not touch that child. God does not want human offerings. At least that's what our faith traditions teach. God doesn't want innocent children to die, period. If this is all true, then what could have possibly caused Jephthah to destroy his daughter? And the rabbis answer beautifully that had he really known the essence of the Jewish religion, he would never, ever have said or done that. Now, we know from our own time, there are people who interpret religion wrongly. They also confuse patriotism with nationalism, xenophobia, authoritarianism. Witness not just politicians, even religions, which empty the pockets of the poor and working class, in some cases manipulative, charismatic, self-promoters. People who use even America as a means to their own ends, not a nation founded on the idea of justice for all. Jephthah was ignorant of what Judaism stands for, and he sacrificed his daughter in the process. No person I know could believe in such a brutal faith. No God we envision would ever sanction the desecration of God's image and name through the killing of a child created in God's own image. That would make God the parent a partner in something so hideous. It suggests a God who's into child abuse and the killing of children, and that's not a God we believe in. The story of Jephthah, the story of Pinchas, reminds us that yes, be religious, but as a means to the ethical. You can't suspend your mind. To be a religious person, to be an American, no matter what your path to God, means to do good, not evil. To strive for holiness, to do whatever we can to transform our nation and world that is into the world we know that can be, but to do it by acting intelligently rather than so zealously. For the future of our city here in Memphis, for the future of our nation on this July 4th weekend, for the future of Israel and the world, really does depend on us, not God. So let us resolve on this Shabbat and July 4th weekend to stay passionate, yes, and enthusiastic about our nation and faith, but without stoking the fear and fanaticism that leads to the distorted and false sense of shalom Pinchas found. As Rabbi Kinky Friedman reminds us, if you're looking for God's helping hand, try one at the end of your arm. May we learn from Pinchas's mistakes, Jephthah's mistakes. May we learn from our founders' mistakes, so that every American who is born equal becomes more equal in this land of America we love. Amen.